You are listening to the Examine Life with Bram Levinson.
Welcome back to the podcast. So I've been talking to students this week about why we practice yoga, why we sit for meditation. And for me, and something I was guiding the students in a meditation yesterday evening, was the understanding that when we sit and we, close our eyes and start to focus on breathing and start to focus on the body itself letting go of whatever it was holding on to as a result of being involved in the game of life, we end up finding this calm, we end up finding this peace, and ultimately it gives us this perspective. And for me, it is a moment where I feel like I'm connecting to something bigger than us. I feel like I'm connecting to spirit. I feel like I'm connecting to source energy, an energy that I believe has been referred to by many different names, by many different cultures and beliefs and religions and faith systems. I think that this one source energy is what we refer to as God. And I mean that in personally a non-religious way. But I believe that, all kinds of names have been attributed to that energy, whether those names be Jesus or Allah, whether the names be Krishna or Adonai, or any of the other names that are given to deities, deities that people pray to and that see as some higher power than us mere mortals. When I sit in meditation, when I practice yoga, these are rituals for me that I can keep coming back to come back into connection, communion with this energy, where I am reminded that this is the energy that animates my body, this body. And I'm reminded that it is the energy that animates all bodies and all beings. And ultimately, it brings me out of the game of life's trickery that would have us believe that we have so many things that divide us and so many ways that we're different, to the understanding that this energy animates everything and everyone. And that alone is the unifying force. That alone is the invisible thread that binds us all together. And so I was talking to them about how, it doesn't really matter what your practice is. Your practice could be, tuning out in front of Netflix. Your practice could be jogging or cycling or hiking. It can be other things that have nothing to do with physical activity or inactivity. But nonetheless, I think that every single one of us needs to find what that ritual is that brings us back to that bigger picture perspective, that brings us out of the daily dramas, that takes us away from the narrative that we can very easily get stuck in. And to quote my teacher, Joan Ravinsky, when we get stuck in those narratives, we are experiencing moments in life of concealment, where any higher awareness, any higher knowledge, any awareness of our own higher selves is gone. We're just in the drama, we're in the story, and it's not even a question of being present or being aware that we are lost in the narrative. We're just doing it. We're just in it, and we're acting and reacting. For me, when I find these moments of connection to, that unifying force, to that energy, the byproduct of that is moments of grace, moments of remembering all of the work and all of the innate knowledge that had nothing really to do with work, but work just reminded me. And it really is about understanding that what we experience in those moments of connection and communion should be brought out as often as possible into normal day-to-day practices, right? So it's not just something that we experience when we sit for meditation, or when we get on a yoga mat to come to practice, or when we get on the bike to cycle, or when we go jogging, wherever we do that. Knowing ourselves to embody this energy is something that we should be doing all the time in order to, number one, keep a healthy perspective on the game of life and not take anything too seriously, but also to remind ourselves to recognize that, all those other people walking around who may speak different languages or have a different skin tone or a different gendered body or pray to a different God, ultimately the how can I put this? The packaging may seem different from the packaging that we are walking around with, that I am walking around with, but ultimately what animates that packaging is exactly the same. And it is that spirit. It is that unifying force. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this now and the reason why I wanted to talk about it, and I did talk about it to students this week, is because as we enter the holiday season, this for me is a season that is all about spirit. Now, just keep in mind that I grew up in a Jewish household, and so for me, Christmas has always been a story. It has been a myth. It's been a fairy tale, albeit one that most of the people who I knew, especially as I grew older into adolescence and adulthood, seemed to incorporate into their lives in a very big way. But nonetheless, for me, for my family, and I can't really speak for my community back when I was a kid, but I'd go out on a limb to say that the whole sort of Christmas story, Santa Claus thing, brotherhood, sisterhood, whatever, to me it was a story. I understood that everybody else did it. And, I believe that the people who were part of my community recognized that it seemed like most of the world did it as well and adhered to whatever that sort of romanticized storyline was. But nonetheless, it was a storyline. And there was a certain theatricality about it for me as a kid. And then I grew up. And I moved out of my parents' home, and all of a sudden I wanted a Christmas tree in my home. And I wanted to partake in Christmas. I wanted to be around like the Christmas dinner table with relatives, just massacring a turkey, or I don't know what. I don't know what I had in terms of the fantasy, but definitely I was sort of caught up in the romanticism of Christmas. And as I grew older and as I guess grew somewhat wiser and more aware, I began to recognize that it had very little to do with a Christmas tree, and it had very little to do with gifts under that Christmas tree. And to a certain extent, it didn't have to do with family either, although I do know that that is a huge thing for a lot of people, to be with their family at Christmas time, which is what makes this Christmas for so many people so much more of a burden to carry and to get through, and might be very, very emotional and perhaps cognitively, challenging as we approach Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, and as people go through it without the presence of their annual rituals and without the presence of their loved ones with them. But what I grew up to recognize is that it really is about there being a spirit, a Christmas spirit. And for me, it's always been something that was almost palpable, almost tangible. It was something you could feel. It's something that I have felt in the air when I have been walking down the street and no one was around. And again, as someone who grew up as a Jew, I don't, and by the way, I don't identify as anything right now or today in this chapter of my life, but as a kid, I was a Jewish kid, and I thought it was amazing that like when you went out and on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, the streets were empty. And and then later on, Saturday Night Live did that amazing sketch called Christmas Time for the Jews, which was exactly my experience. And to a certain extent, it still is. Because when I do go outside, let's say to walk the dog on Christmas Eve or Christmas night, and the streets are empty, and even Christmas Day, the streets are empty. To me, there's, number one, something fascinating about that, but also leading up to, the holiday itself, there is, there's something in the air. There is what I have always identified as being the holiday spirit, the Christmas spirit. And for me, it was a sense of brotherhood and a sense of sisterhood, a sense of goodwill and good cheer that unified everyone and brought everybody to a place where there was just kindness to be given and, I guess, commonality to be found. what I was talking to students about this week is that when you sit in meditation, if that is your ritual, or if you get on the yoga mat to practice asana and that is your ritual, that is your way of touching spirit. It's your way of coming back to a higher knowledge, a higher energy, an energy that for many can be a source of solace, especially in a moment of time when things are very odd and where people are being told that they can't be together. And again, I'm just going to sort of backtrack a couple of episodes in the podcast, but this term social distancing is an irresponsible term. Physical distancing, I totally get. I understand it. Social distancing, I think, has a lot of psychological fallout that is harmful and I don't think is justified. I think that if anything, we need to be more socially together and unified and cohesive than ever. We can stay physically distant, that's fine, but we need to be here for each other. And when we tune into that unifying force through whatever the ritual is that we come back to over and over and over again as a practice, I think it's essential that we understand that when we do that, we are taken out of the narrative. We are given the big picture perspective to be able to find not only, the calm that comes when one feels connection to something bigger than us, but to have the wherewithal to be able to bring that calm with us out into the world and perhaps pass it on in a very responsible and respectful and honorable way. And so I was telling people that, if you do have a ritual, whether it's meditation or yoga or whatever it is, and you do have the ability to come into contact with that unifying force, to be in the presence of it, and to, just let it affect you in the best way possible. I think there's never been a better opportunity than this Christmas, this holiday season, whatever the holiday is that you're celebrating. There's never been a better opportunity for us to bring that sense of calm into the world in ways that may be new, in ways that have nothing to do with going out and buying gifts for people, in ways that have nothing to do with going over to people's homes and spending time with them and, eating and drinking and being merry with them. I think that this is our opportunity to get creative and to do what we can to, not only contribute to that palpable sense of brotherhood and sisterhood and good cheer that is always felt around the holiday season for those of us who are fortunate enough to have that experience. But I think it's an opportunity for us to find new ways to contribute to that energy, to not only just recognize that it exists, but to feed it, to be part of a whole, part of something bigger that we get to, channel that unifying force out into the world in very specific ways, in very real ways. So I'm telling you this, I'm talking about this because I was on social media earlier today and my younger brother posted something, an initiative that was created by Roger Pugsley, who is president at Pugsley CX Consulting. And if you're not familiar with CX is customer experience. And this is really, I think, a fascinating industry, an industry that focuses on just that, customer experience, and helps companies, prioritize the customer experience in their business model to make sure that it's not just about the company's needs and the bottom line, but actually taking into consideration that there is a whole industry out there for the sake of making sure that the customer is satisfied, that the customer is being met on levels that perhaps archaic systems of business would never have addressed. So Roger Pugsley had basically posted something on social media that my younger brother reposted, and this is the post. Afternoon, friends. With the holidays fast approaching, and all of us pushing the pedal to the metal until they land, it's important to remember what a hard year 2020 has been on so many, and to propagate acts of kindness wherever we can. Please read, and where able, act upon the gestures in this calendar to brighten someone's day. Huge thanks, Roger Pugsley, for lighting the candle so brightly and being such an outstanding human being. So that last bit was my brother's addition. And what Roger and subsequently my brother did was post this kindness calendar for December 2020. And it breaks it's basically a calendar of the month of December. And on every day, there is an act to do. Day 1, December 1st, Tuesday, share the kindness calendar with others and spread kindness. Wednesday the 2nd, contact someone you can't be with to see how they are. And it goes on. I'm not going to go through all of them. What I have done is I've posted the post that my brother posted and the kindness calendar up on all my social media platforms. And what I was fascinated about when I saw it this evening was this is exactly what I've been talking to people about this week. Just in terms of, let's spread some cheer. Let's go the extra mile this year, metaphorically, because we can't do it literally. Let's go out and make a difference day by day with intention. To me, this is the most spiritual thing that we can do. This is something that allows us to channel what we tap into when we come back to our ritual, whatever that ritual may be. And it gives us the opportunity to take all of that muchness that we get from those rituals and from those practices and actually amplify them and direct them in ways that matter now more than ever. If being socially cohesive is more important now than it ever has been, this is the time to remember that, and this is the time to do something about it. There are many people who have had a hard year. I mean, I don't know anybody who really hasn't. But there are many people who are going to have a hard month, knowing that they can't be in the presence of the people who they love most. For some people, that's parents who are, older and have probably had one of the hardest collective moments throughout this year. The elderly population who have been told that they're at risk and that they can't see the people they love because the people they love could potentially, transmit this virus and do some serious damage. And so I think that this is just one of the greatest opportunities to make this experience of not just, pandemica better, but to make this experience of life better in a moment where I think spiritually we are being asked not to protest and not to wail against the injustice of it all, but to understand that life has a lesson here in store for all of us. Life is presenting us with difficult moments where we don't have the freedom that we typically do have in quote-unquote normal times. What happens when we have luxuries taken away from us? And they are luxuries. Well, either we're going to get so stuck in the story, have moments of serious concealment where we rage and we wail and we protest and we, stay stuck in the narrative, or we connect. We connect to that unifying force. We connect to something bigger than us and understand that maybe we're being asked to act in that energy's name, in its amplification. Maybe we're just being asked to channel it into the world and to act, I suppose, God-like. If we would define God as being kind and generous and merciful and compassionate, maybe this whole situation is asking us to take on all of those attributes and to amplify them out into the world and to make specifically this month a better one for people than it would be if there weren't some people just, rising to the challenge, allowing themselves to be elevated by their own personal practices, spiritual, religious practices, and then going out to help elevate other people. I guess one of the biggest spiritual teachings in this moment, in this pandemic, is, are we doing this for ourselves? Are we going to get stuck in my narrative and me and I? Or am I going to transfer that? Am I going to reframe the situation and understand that this is very much about the us and the we? And so I urge you to go onto my social media platforms and find this post, this kindness calendar. Download it, save the photo, whatever you want to do. Share it. Please, let's amplify this as big as we can. I think I'm getting in on this very early on in its inception, and I love that it sort of tied in to what I've been talking to students about this week. But let's turn this into a proper movement. Let's be part of, an energy that is out there that is going to change the narrative of what this month is going to be like for many, many, many people. Let's alter a vibration. Let's play magician. Let's turn, as my mother would say, lemons into lemonade. But let's turn this holiday season around, and let's make sure that it is, like every other year, in my memory anyway, let's make sure that it is a moment for brotherhood and sisterhood and togetherness and kindness and generosity and cheer and love and hope and opportunity. So, with that said, go check it out. I'm wishing you all the happiest of holidays. Have a wonderful December. I will potentially record another episode before the holidays come, but, in case you don't listen to that or in case I don't, happy holidays to everyone. This has been, I think, a really magical year. It's been a very spiritual year. It's been a very meaningful year. And a lot of people are saying that 2020 is a year that we want to strike off the calendar. I could not disagree more. I think that this is probably the most important year that exists in my lifetime, because we have been forced into new ways. We have been forced to adapt and to show ourselves, to be reminded that we are such adaptable creatures. And I think it's just been a concentrated moment of change for humanity. And I'm really grateful to be alive to witness it, the ongoing saga of it all. But even more importantly, I'm very grateful to be able to be part of something like this initiative that I initially found through my brother, Lawrence Levinson, but who basically directed me very quickly to Roger Pugsley. So Roger, if you're listening to this, thank you. I hope that this helps amplify what you intended to do. And I'm just very grateful. I'm very grateful that there are other light bearers out there who are doing this kind of work, so that we can all be reminded that we have the choice as to whether we act in grace or in concealment. So, give this all a good think, and I'll see you later.
This has been The Examine Life with Bram Levinson.